Hello and welcome everyone. Today, on behalf of Bates Ltd, I'm delighted to be speaking with Jade from the ILG Community. ILG Community's mission is to make independent living better. Jade, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to learn more about the ILG community, about the podcast, and about your journey. But to start us off, can you tell us a bit more about ILG in your own words and the kind of work you do?
ILG Community was set up around 4 years ago now. It was seen there was a gap in the market for there wasn't any communities or groups just for PA employers, and it's quite a specific thing. I always feel there's a bit of an irony about it, really, that you have to be sort of, disabled enough to qualify for care, but along with that comes all the responsibilities of becoming an employer. I mean, there are other routes, but they each sort of have their own positives and negatives, and there are a lot of positives to employing your own PAs. You get to choose exactly who you like. You get to say, dictate your own care. You get that control. However, the support for that is really patchy across the country. You get some areas where the support is fantastic, and then areas like, unfortunately, my own, where I went years without meeting another employer. The support was terrible. And I think the most common thing you'll find from PA employers, the most common phrase is that we feel quite isolated. And so David actually approached me to say he was setting this group up and wanted to know if I was interested. And it's just snowballed from there, really. It was meant to just be a group for PA employers to have a voice, but it has grown more than that. So our committee is made up half of people that run their own budgets. That's more than half, actually. And then just under half run a budget for someone else or have expertise in the area. So we all understand what it's like either to be a carer or to run your own budget, and to the difficulties that entails.
Yeah.
And then from there, we have set up all 3 events, and they're all online. That was the other crucial part. So we set up just in the, I think it was just at the end of the year 2020, going on to 21. And the massive difference that most people are aware of is things like Zoom came about. So before that, people like me who struggle to travel, that can't really leave the house very easily, we just couldn't meet up with each other. It was really difficult.
Yeah.
And so suddenly having this technology, it just opened up a whole new world that you could meet other employers, socialize, campaign with each other without having to leave your house. It meant such a lot. And a lot of the pre-existing organisations around care, that they often meet in person. So you'll find they'll have like a yearly meetup in London or Manchester, and
Yeah.
that's just inaccessible to so many of us, and a bit frustrating, really, because I think that's known, and they don't always seem to make best use of technology to allow a hybrid option, at least.
Yeah.
So we kept all our events online, and I know that might not suit everybody, but it suits a lot of people. And we get people dipping in and out of events that we run. So I had a lady contact me this week with really severe ME, and she was like, "Do you mind if I just come in? But if I have to leave, is that all right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's why we exist. Like, we understand stuff like that happens." We record all our events as well for accessibility reasons, so people can watch them afterwards. And we hold a lot of events on different topics, so people can learn. There's a lot of interactivity. So yeah, it's been really good. We also do peer support sessions. We have a Facebook group to talk. We've had some really amazing webinars this year. We've had some really cool people come and speak to us. So yeah, it's been really good.
That's amazing, and I think technology is a big thing for me that I can see how much of an impact it's had on, especially in these communities. It's you mentioned Zoom, but I think technology in general has just been like a kind of backbone for a lot of people, especially over the pandemic, but then also just before that as well. I think the growth of technology in society has only been a benefit to a lot of people.
It has. I think it's also the fact it was kind of forced on organisations as well,
Yeah.
because I was attending an event before that, at my local council, Essex County Council, were holding a co-production group on their direct payments. That was the first time. This was just before ILG Community set up, and that was my first sort of real meeting other employers, but it was all in person. And so I would go to these events and it would take me days to recover. I would have to have a PA to help me with my wheelchair, help me get there. And it was just a bit of a nightmare. And I
Yeah.
remember contacting the organizer and saying, is there any chance that I could attend online by the next session? And they weren't horrible or anything, but they were just like, oh, I don't know how to do that. I'm not sure if that's possible. And then that was something like March 2020. We went into lockdown, and then the next event was entirely held online, and they
Yeah.
suddenly found they could do it because they were forced to. And I get it, this isn't a judgment on them, but a lot of people just weren't used to things like Zoom and
Yeah.
other
Well, I think
meetings.
I think there's a reluctance for a lot of companies at the time to actually go fully remote as well, and things like that, where they don't people don't have to be in the office every day for a lot of jobs. There's a lot of wasted energy, a lot of wasted time that goes into people traveling to different places, and how much money you save by not going there. But then there's also like when you go to events, there's a lot of wasted money at the events themselves. So like actually putting on the event, renting out the halls or wherever they're doing the events, getting the food for everybody, getting the drinks for everybody. There's so much that goes into it, so much wasted money, and especially if that's being funded by charity or by government or taxpayer, that has a big effect as well. That people didn't really understand until after the pandemic happened, and like you say, they were forced into it, and I think that's only been positive, I would say, for a lot of people when it comes to this kind of care community.
Absolutely. And I think that's why we've been able to do such a lot of good, because we don't have all those expenses, the travel expenses, all the things you've just listed. But we can get a whole group of, almost 100 employers together with a speaker. We're volunteering our time. The speaker is usually volunteering their time. So we're able to do it, for next to nothing, yet the impact that has on the employers to learn the information is immense. So, yeah.
So this month is Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome Awareness Month. Can you tell us a bit about the syndrome?
Yeah, so it's quite a complex, difficult condition to describe. It's basically caused by a faulty gene. There are actually around or more than 13 types, and the type that I have is the most common, which is hypermobility type. But there are lots of others, some where only a small handful of people have them, some where lots of people have them. What it is the connective tissue in your body is faulty, and connective tissue makes up something like 95% of your body. So if you think that connective tissue is the building blocks of the house, as it were, and if you think of like 95% of the house being kind of faulty, it's going to impact on everything. There literally isn't anything it won't impact. The main way of describing it is that the ligaments and tendons in my body don't work properly. And so my joints can very easily dislocate or partially dislocate, which is called subluxation. And because of that, the muscles in my body tighten up to try and stop that from happening. So it's a constant cycle of pain. And that cycle is really complex, because it's not just, oh, it's just joint pain or it's just muscular pain. It literally impacts every part of the body, every nerve. It's really difficult to treat. And also the fact that because the ligaments and tendons aren't working, just for example, sitting here, my body is firing like 10 times more than the average person's just to do normal things. And so that just leads to a constant cycle of exhaustion within itself, let alone the fact that you're not sleeping properly on top of it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it is quite difficult to explain.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you did say it's quite difficult to treat as well. Is it difficult to diagnose, I imagine, because if it affects everyone differently, how do you diagnose something like that?
Yeah, it's extremely difficult. So I have a couple of statistics here, which is that 95% of people with the condition remain undiagnosed or misdiagnosed, and that the average rate of diagnosis, it takes on average 10 to 20 years to get diagnosed.
Wow. Oh my goodness. So you could be living with this for a lot of your life actually, and kind of suffering and not knowing why.
Yeah, absolutely. People have had this condition their whole lives, died, and still don't know that they've had it.
Wow.
There is a lot of ignorance around this condition. Not necessarily in an awful way, but you might have a doctor who read about it once in medical school, 20, 30 years ago, and they
Yeah.
don't necessarily come across it every day. So some of the most ignorance I've had is sort of local consultants, rheumatologists, that kind of thing, who are incredibly dismissive, And so it took me 8.5 years to get diagnosed.
Yeah.
So for some people, they're born with it. Well, everyone is born with it, but you can have symptoms from sort of day one. Or people like me, who I had very mild symptoms throughout childhood, nothing that you connect to say, oh, that's a condition, just sort of weird things like bouts of growing pains. I used to fall over a lot.
Yeah.
Things like my handwriting has always been terrible and I never knew why, and I struggled to tie shoelaces. So nothing you'd go, oh, something's going on there. You just feel a bit silly, really, because you struggle with these random things and you fall over a lot. The name that my family would have called me the most as a child is clumsy. That's definitely one you'll get a lot of people understanding once they've got the condition. But at the age of 15, for me, it kind of triggered. This is really common, particularly with girls, that there's a link with puberty, that it just sort of triggers the condition. And so from there, it took me 8.5 years of being told there was nothing wrong with me. Then it was like, oh, it's all in your head. Then I got diagnosed with things like fibromyalgia and ME. And it felt like they were sort of labels to make me go away, stop bugging me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people with fibromyalgia feel that way. It's used as oh, we don't know, take this label and go away. Whereas fibromyalgia, the reality is that there is an underlying reason for someone being in chronic pain. And fibromyalgia might be the end result, that the body is overfiring with pain, but that's not the initial cause. And that's where doctors often stop and won't get into that. So yeah, it wasn't until I'd seen many consultants, physiotherapists. I was told things like I just needed to sit up straight, that it was my posture, just such a load of nonsense throughout that 8.5 years. And a lot of, you need to see a psychologist, there's something wrong with you.
Wow.
It's a really common story, particularly for women, I have to say. That's not to say every man has had a good time in the medical system either, but women will disproportionately be told, it's still that old stereotype of you're hysterical, you're a young hysterical woman, and you think that's gone away now, but it hasn't.
Yeah.
It's really sad when you begin hearing other stories of people with all kinds of chronic illnesses that have been dismissed. And then I finally was seeing a physiotherapist, one of many I'd seen, but she happened to point out that I was very hypermobile. I didn't even know what that meant at the time. She said it was like double jointedness. And to me, when I think of double jointedness, I think of people being able to do sort of tricks with their hands, being able to, well, mine isn't really in my hands. So it just hadn't occurred to me until I got home and I Googled hypermobility, and this condition, Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, popped up, and I was reading it and I was like, oh my God, that's me, that's my life. And for me, I've since realised all my hypermobility is in sort of more hidden joints. So it's in my ankles, my knees, my hips, my spine. So it's still very much obviously impacting my life, but it's not as obvious, say, for some.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine that moment when you were reading the symptoms and you're like, this is all making sense now.
Yeah. It was such a relief. Obviously, I didn't know, I wasn't saying I had it at that point, but I was reading it going, oh my God, this really, it is hard to explain how it feels after 8.5 years of being told, it's in your head.
Yeah.
And I went from a perfectly healthy person that could do 10-mile hikes for fun to struggling to be able to get around a shop. At that point, I was starting to have to use a wheelchair, and then being told this is somehow down to me, that it's my head doing this to me. It's really hard to explain how that feels. And so I went to my GP. She then referred me, after a long process. It's never easy on the NHS, but I got sent to the London specialist, Professor Graham, who is very well known. He's now retired, but he is kind of the British top specialist, or was for a very long time, in this condition. And it was the first consultant that actually sat down and listened to me in all those 8.5 years. And he said, yeah, he diagnosed me with it, went through all the criteria, etc. And yeah, even though it's an incurable condition and there isn't a lot of treatment for it. I mean, I would go as far as to say there isn't treatment for it. That sounds really negative. There are things you can do, which are around like strengthening your joints. And for me, I find things like massage really, really helpful. Some people find things like swimming and sort of low impact exercises really helpful.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to keep on top of it. Your muscles decondition quicker than other people's. So it is really difficult to sort of get to a good place with it.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it's quite a story that you went through the whole 8.5 years, but even like the growing up being called clumsy and all this kind of stuff, it must have like a real impact on you as a person being called all this stuff when you know deep down it's not actually you that's clumsy, or you're not missing stuff all the time. It's actually something that's physical that's happening to you. It must have been quite a relief to get that kind of diagnosis in the end. And so, is that the only place that you can get it, at that place in London, or is there more places now?
I think there's two places. The Royal Orthopaedic Hospital at Stanmore also sees people, but as far as I know, and there's either two or three consultants on the NHS, and as far as I know, that's for almost the whole of the UK.
Wow.
You might get an odd other consultant in something else, like a geneticist or a rheumatologist who also sees patients, but they're the main top specialists, and that is the problem now that to get diagnosed with it is so incredibly difficult within itself. People are often waiting years. The hospital in London is known for closing their waiting list because they get so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And the other thing they do is something called a diagnose and discharge. So unlike other complex conditions of this level where you'd be seeing a consultant regularly, that does not happen with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. You get your diagnosis, they then discharge you to what they consider local care.
Yeah.
When I got diagnosed a long time ago, my GP wrote to the local rheumatologist and said, I've just been diagnosed. Would you take on her care? His letter, I quote almost word for word, is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is too complex for me to manage. I will not take her on, full stop. That was
Wow.
his charming letter. So people like me then get left in limbo entirely. I have another quote actually from Professor Graham, who says, no other disease in the history of modern medicine has been neglected in such a way as Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I think those of us with it live that every day and completely, yeah, it's so right.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit neatly in a box. I think that's the other problem. The other conditions you might be under, I don't know, a cardiologist or whatever specialism, but as ours fits under about 8 different specialisms, no one consultant sort of takes you under their wing and says, oh, this is my condition to manage. So you just get bounced around and it's awful.
Yeah, well, thank you for explaining that to me and kind of telling me all about your journey. It sounds like it was quite must have been quite difficult there at times, especially like growing up with it and then being a teenager, not knowing what's happening. I mean, that can be a difficult time as it is, going through puberty as a young person, male or female. I think the point of having that kind of debilitating syndrome happening as well, it must have been really hard.
Yeah, and especially when you don't have the diagnosis. So, imagine cancelling a night out with your 17-year-old, 18-year-old friends. They're, best will in the world, teenagers aren't always the most empathetic to each other. And especially when it's for
Yeah.
some vague, I'm in pain, and they're going to start going, oh, you're so boring. Like you didn't used to be like this. You'd come out
Yeah.
with us, etc. Yeah, I mean, my friends now are fantastic, but as teenagers, yeah, it's hard to grasp.
Yeah. Do you know other people that suffer with the similar symptoms as you?
Oh yeah, yeah. But what I would say is because it is a syndrome, people are impacted very, very differently.
Yeah.
So one of my closest friend who has the condition, he's more impacted with his stomach and eating and that kind of thing. Whereas for me, it's my mobility, so I have to use a wheelchair to get about, that kind of thing. So it can impact people in very, very different ways. And that can be difficult as well because you can sort of, sometimes there's a thought from others, some people are able to work full time with the condition. Other people are completely stuck in bed all the time. It really does impact people in different ways. And you can almost get a feeling of, oh, I can do something. Why can't that person? And that
Yeah.
kind of thing. But you also get the most amazing support by knowing people who get it. Like my circle of friends have all different kind of chronic illnesses, or one of my circles of friends locally. We pick places to go out to eat based on how comfortable the seating is. We
Yeah.
don't care about the food. It's
Yeah.
like we'll be in agony sitting there for the night, whereas that wouldn't occur to other people. And things like, is there close accessible parking? Like I don't want to be going into the town centre and trying to find a blue badge space and then trying to get my wheelchair out. I'd prefer to go out of the town, find a parking space and be able to go straight in. It's things like that you don't necessarily think about until you're in that situation, and then it's nice not to have to be the awkward one saying, oh, I can't go there, it's not accessible to me. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, going back to what we were talking about earlier about technology, that must be another good thing about what you were talking about there, like finding out is it accessible to get into the restaurant? What are the chairs like? You can look at reviews from other people that might have put that in there. Is there a specific app for people with disabilities that they can go to look at that, or do they just use Google like everyone?
Yeah, I'm sure there are apps out there. I only recently embarrassingly found out on Google Maps that if you click a location, a symbol comes up if it's wheelchair accessible. And probably
Wow.
everyone in the world knew about this
Yeah.
except me, but I found out this year and was like, oh, that's so exciting. I had no idea.
Yeah.
It's little things like that that are really, really helpful. I mean, access can be a difficult one anyway, because what's accessible to one isn't necessarily to another.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if you're walking, but you struggle to walk for long distances, you might not want a ramp tucked around the back of a building, whereas if you're in a power wheelchair, that might not bother you so
Yeah.
much. Or things like someone might be able to manage a small step, like some manual wheelchair users can go up slightly bigger steps than sometimes a power wheelchair can, or vice versa. It just
Yeah.
depends. So
Yeah, you kind of want a bit more information, don't you? It's like this is accessible, but how is it accessible? And will I have to call someone out to come and bring a ramp, or is there a ramp there already? Like you just don't know like what does accessible mean? Is someone going to wheel me up the stairs? You just don't know what's going to happen. So, and I think as speaking about anxiety earlier, I can imagine that plays a big part into it as well. You want to know that one, you're not going to be like the center of attention when you arrive at a place, and you also don't want to cause a fuss as well. You don't want to draw people out from their jobs and stuff like that. So I can imagine that plays into it as well. So there's so many facets to this, and I think that's why it's great that you've got the ILG community, because like you say, people need support, people need a community that they can lean on, making friends with that are going through similar things to them. And the big thing is it's all online, so it's all accessible for everybody. No one has to miss out, and it's completely free as well.
Yeah, and we, if big events aren't for you, the big online events, our peer support sessions are great as well. They're much smaller. They're run by 2 committee members, and it's a much more informal place to come and just have a chat. Our next event is on challenging care decisions. That is going to be a really good event. We've got some really great speakers. We've got someone called Yo Dunn, who was recently involved with a case against Lancashire County Council that really pushed back on some of the decisions they were making for PA employers, things like around the wage that they can be paid, the fact that councils at the moment often claw back money from your budget without your agreement, and it sort of set a lot of that out to say it's wrong. So she's coming along to tell us all about that case, which I think will be really, really interesting. And we've also got a panel discussion after that. And that's on the 9th of June, 1:30 to 3:30. And we've got people on the panel that will cover both CHC funding and direct payments. There's basically almost 2 routes to get PAs. One is through the NHS, and you'll often hear the CHC funding, and then others are through direct payments. And the laws for both are slightly different, so it does get confusing, but both need support and are very welcome to our events.
Yeah. Well, I know that you've been going for 4 years now. When is the 5-year anniversary? Do you reckon there'll be any kind of like big event for that?
Yeah, so I guess it'll be next year. We have not discussed that yet, but there should be. There definitely should be. That would be really good to highlight what we've done so far and highlight where we're going as well. So yeah.
Yeah, it'd be great to hear some of the stories from some of the people that have been involved, or people that have like experienced help from your community and things like that over the last 4.5 years or however long. Well, I really do appreciate you staying and talking to me for so long. I've kept you for an hour.
No, that's fine. Thank you so much. It's been lovely to meet you, and good to stay in touch and discuss more. Yeah.
Yeah, lovely to meet you too. Thanks, Jade.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.